Jesus Freak here. Now, I understand that my interpretation of Scripture is a bit unusual. There's just a couple major guidelines I use. The first is that I see it holistically. That means I see it as a whole unified thing, not as necessarily 66 books, not as necessarily about 1,200 chapters and 31,000 verses. These, of course, these last two numbers are rounded off. See, I feel like if you're quote mining the Bible, or selectively focusing on one book over another without understanding it holistically, you're missing the forest for the trees, or even for the individual leaves. The second thing is, unless I have a reason not to understand something literally, I generally do. One example why I might not understand something literally is it's a poem. For example, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, poems. Some parts in them can and probably should be treated literally. Other parts obviously shouldn't. A child is not an arrow, for example. It would be daft to interpret any other way. But when I mean I take it holistically, you have to understand the Old Testament in the light of the New and the New in the light of the Old. It doesn't make any sense any other way. You could say that the Old Testament does make sense on its own, but you're missing something important. And that's what the Old Testament is pointing to. Because when all is said and done, everything points to a single event in recorded history. And I'm not going to say it's the incarnation, even though that's what the epic on our calendar is based on. I'm pointing to the crucifixion and the resurrection, and which are close enough that you can pretty much treat it as one event for the purposes of my statement, even though they're obviously a couple days apart. The symbolism of Jonah living in a sea monster's stomach for 3 days. Jesus didn't bring that up randomly. What's it saying? The new is in the old concealed, the old is in the new revealed? Is it something like that? That's a perfect example of what I mean. You gotta interpret the Bible holistically. But when I say you have to take an overwhelmingly literal approach, there's some examples of people who take various verses of Scripture in ways that just make no sense. For example, And I'm not sure if the Church of Rome does this. Orthodox, they call themselves. Church actually, he says, as, blessed is the man, Psalm 1:1, and say it has to be talking, what's the verse? Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful, and say, it's talking about Jesus. But if you read the thing in context, not quote mine Psalm 1, it's comparing good and evil so much as there can be such a good thing, such a thing as good. There's no one good but God. And that interpretation falls on its face. Because you're quote mining and building an interpretation on a quote mine. That's why I say, you can't see the Bible as just a bunch of quotations, a bunch of chapters, a bunch of verses. It's more than that. And if you see it as nothing more, like I said, you're missing the forest for the trees. Jesus, freak out.